Welcome back, you sad people. Time to educate you with some truth. It seems to be pretty common knowledge that our generation is the unhappiest generation of all time. After all, everything just seems to be so much harder these days.
The cost of living just seems to be going up at stupid rates, while our incomes remain stagnant. I mean, just look at how much easier it was to buy a house back in the day versus today. Makes sense that a lot of us still live with our parents. On top of that, we're the loneliest generation. As social media scared us all into thinking our neighbor is a serial killer, we tend to trust people less. Now, there are probably other reasons as to why people have fewer friends today than in the past, but what matters is that people report feeling more lonely than ever. And being lonely hurts, man. Young people really are sad these days. But hear me out. What if people were just always sad? It seems like because everyone talks about being depressed, we think our generation's sadness is unique. There definitely is less of a stigma today towards mental illness than there was in the past, so we're inevitably going to hear about it more. And this was not the case in the past. Like if my grandfather told his boss that he wanted a mental health day, they probably would have tarred and feathered his ass. Just take a second to think about it. Yeah, living a life of playing video games and jerking off all day and while having no friends is pretty depressing, but you can't seriously be telling me that working in the factories for 16 hours straight 7 days a week gave people a happier life. Sure, this is just the working man, which by the way was like 99% of people at the time, but even Gatsby was a sad motherfucker, who guess what? Fucking dies. Okay, fine. Maybe the early industrial age wasn't all that great. What about the fantastical 60s, the time of the famous baby boomers? Now I have to say, this period of time is definitely heavily romanticized by the fact that everything was affordable and a single income could lead to a comfortable life. But people also beat their wives for sport and would probably throw rocks at their local black man. There's a reason generational trauma exists today, and that's because these baby boomer households were just not the happy, healthy environment that everyone thinks that they were.
And the reason I say all this is not to invalidate the struggle that is the average Gen Z lifestyle, but it's to emphasize the fact that we're not alone in our struggle. Depression isn't just a new phenomenon that came about when cyberbullying rose and markets fell.
No, it's a lot more rooted into our biology. We're designed to feel this way.
You see, depression isn't in the same category of mental illnesses that only cause harm, such as dementia or Alzheimer's. Instead, it's an evolved trait that allowed our species to make it this far. That's why you really only see dementia and Alzheimer's in old people, but you see depression mostly in young people.
Okay, you might be thinking, how in the world can depression be beneficial, my guy? It literally lowers the lifespan of the people who have it. And this is true. Depression does increase the risk of cardiovascular disease, inflammation, and is the main cause of suicide. But just give me a second, and I'll elaborate. Let's travel back in time and take a second to understand the way our ancestors lived. People usually lived in tribes the size of 50 to 100 people, which to help you visualize is the capacity of a third world country motorbike.
As resources were limited, our ancestors tended to have a more nomadic lifestyle, where they'd find enough food to survive, create basic shelter, and then move on to the next spot to find more resources.
People would move together, hunt together, raise the kids together, and eat together. So how does this all relate to depression? Well, my friends, this is the lifestyle and environment that our bodies adapted to be successful in. We lived in communities because it allowed us to protect each other and hunt large animals, and depression is one of the mechanisms that allowed us to survive in this environment. But how? First and foremost, depression is a social signal, which crazy enough, increases social bonding. People who are depressed would display an increased level of vulnerability and in turn would have received support from others. This mutual exchange of care would ultimately strengthen the tribe. When people care for you, you tend to care for them back. And this level of support has another consequence. It creates trust and reliability towards those who are caring for you. But let's think of why depression can occur in someone in the first place. See, one of the biggest triggers of depression is grief. Losing a loved one can cause unimaginable burdens upon someone. But as terrible as grief is, it increases our empathy as a species. Since it's super painful, the tribe will go great lengths to avoid it, making sure that they protect the people they care about. And I'm using grief as an example here, but in general, people with depression will go lengths to avoid the situation that may have initially caused their depression in the first place. And remember, this is in an age where the situation that caused one's depression probably would have killed them. Depression also changes an individual's social perception from others. They become much more aware of social signals from their peers. And while this may have negative consequences today, as you may think someone hates you when they don't, this heightened awareness could have increased their social value to the tribe. For example, a person dealing with depression will more likely identify when someone is down, and then they can provide that person with the necessary nursing and potential remedies. When you're more valuable to the tribe, you're more likely to be protected during harmful situations, thereby increasing your likelihood of survival. For those of you familiar with the disease, you are well aware of how you can end up isolating yourself from the world. But for our ancestors, in situations involving conflict and competition, the submissive nature of depression helped people survive. By stepping back in a conflict, you'd prevent tensions from rising and hopefully stop an all-out war from happening. Now, if only Hitler was depressed instead of being a monotesticle meth addict. Now, so far, I've discussed how depression helps an individual's survival in the context of social bonding. However, these are probably indirect benefits of depression. See, humans had a lot of enemies. Polar bears, Neanderthals, other tribes, whatever it be. But there's one enemy that we could not fight with our fists. And that, my friends, would be disease. Yeah, there appears to be a strong link between genes associated with depression and genes associated with our immune systems. This overlap could help explain why depression persisted throughout human evolution, despite its negative impact on mood and well-being. It also explains the depressive symptoms you feel when you're sick. But let's discuss what's actually happening in your body. Cytokines are tiny little proteins that attach to bacteria and viruses, and they help our immune cells find and kill them off. When you get sick, your body activates a gene that creates a bunch of these cytokines, which in turn causes inflammation. Now, the excessive levels of cytokines can enter the brain, which interrupts some neural pathways, leading to depressive symptoms. And this is why you feel super low when you're sick. It so happens that individuals who are depressed actually have higher levels of cytokines in their blood, even when they're not physically sick. This also explains why people who are depressed have higher levels of inflammation-related disease, such as heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. Another key link between depression and disease-fighting genes involves the stress response. Over 50% of depressed people have excessive amounts of cortisol in their systems, which, if you don't know, is the stress hormone. Now, regular amounts of stress is healthy for the body, but chronic stress can lead to many problems, one of which is the overproduction of cytokines. In today's day and age, this mechanism's useless. Back in the day, it was probably also useless, in most cases, but in some cases, it would help people survive. Depressive symptoms can lead to stress, and being depressed all the time can lead to chronic stress. Now, in evolutionary terms, social stressors such as rejection or loss could have been cues that physical danger was right around the corner. And being stressed actually causes the immune system to be on high alert. So when you're hit with a wave of depression and sadness, your body is ready to deal with physical harm. Another thing about depression is that it results in sickness behavior. You know, isolating yourself, staying in bed all day, not really wanting to eat, etc., etc. But this is all coordinated by your body so that you can conserve energy, giving the immune system all the power in the world to fight off those pesky pathogens. Now, in the context of hunter-gatherers, where physical injuries and infections were common, isolation and energy conservation would have been vital for survival. Now, the isolating nature of depression also prevents the spread of disease, either by separating yourself from an infected group, keeping yourself healthy, or separating your sick ass from the group, preventing the disease from spreading. After all, an outbreak would probably cause the tribe to collapse, so tribes that didn't have depressed people would eventually die off. Well, there you have it, folks. You were designed to be depressed. Problem is, in the modern age, depression has very little use. With modern medicine, we really don't need to resort to sad boy hours to fight disease, and the self-isolation does way more harm than good, especially since socializing these days is already harder than ever. But worry not, because we do have ways to counter these low feelings. Now, I'm no therapist, I'm fucking better. Just kidding, therapy is good for you kids. Licensed professionals, don't come after me. I don't even remember where I was going with this. The problem with sadness is that it really is the natural state of being. Getting constant dopamine hits from scrolling and playing video games is simply not the move, as you're probably already familiar with that "what am I doing with my life" feeling after a long Call of Duty session getting dismantled by middle schoolers. Yeah, it's sad, but it's easy. Being happy takes work. So what kind of work? Well, let's start off with mindfulness. Simply being present in a situation makes you happier. After all, if you're taking a walk in nature, you're probably happier if you're observing the beauty of nature instead of ruminating on all the cringe memories you have.
Look, I know this stock footage is pretty corny. Nobody actually lives like this, but just try to look past that and just hear me out.
Also, mindful people are charismatic people. Think about it. If you go to a party, the ones who are present appear to be more charming, simply because they're having fun talking to people instead of escaping away on their phones. And in a world full of escapism, it's difficult to be mindful. When you're stuck in an elevator with a beautiful girl, it's easier to go on your phone than to start a conversation. When you have a project due in 3 days, it's easier to turn on the console than it is to actually do your work. But like all things, your ability to be mindful can drastically improve with just a little bit of effort. Take some time in the morning, even just 5 minutes, to focus on your breathing and figure out where your head is at. The more you do this, the more you're going to be able to catch yourself doing mindless things during the day. And trust me, it may not seem like it, but this makes all the difference. Even when you're playing video games, actively enjoy what you're doing instead of passively going through the motions. When you're eating your meals, try to appreciate the flavor of each bite instead of just gulping down your food. Mindfulness is proven to reduce stress, increase self-awareness, and helps break the cycle of rumination, which is often a feature of depression. Another easy but powerful technique is expressing gratitude. Taking time to appreciate the simple things in life pauses the negative thought cycles that reinforce depression, even if it is for a brief moment. But by expressing gratitude daily, you'll start to build resilience over these feelings throughout the day. You'll begin to have a constant sense of appreciation of everything in life, even the difficult situations. And on top of that, the mental and emotional benefits of gratitude extend to physical health, lower stress levels, better sleep, and improved mood. Depression has always been part of the human experience. It may seem like the sadness of these days is unprecedented because we're facing unprecedented problems, but it really is just the same enemy disguised as something new. What is unprecedented is our ability to tackle these problems. We know more now than ever on how to handle and conquer these feelings. And as medicine progresses, perhaps one day we'll defeat depression for good. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider liking and subscribing. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.